Welcome to How to Enable OAuth on Windows Communication Foundation WCF Soap Web Services. Hey, I'm Eric, and if you have done as I have done for the last 10 years, we've used Soap Web Services a lot because that was kind of the way where we could expose BC business logic as web service and access that from C# and all sorts of stuff, all sorts of other platforms. And one of my favorites for a long time was the WCF, the Windows Communication Foundation. You popped in the URL you were given from Dynamics Nav, and it generated all the proxy code and all the plumbing, so you could just do stuff. And what do I mean by do stuff? Well, let me show that. So here's a code unit. Has a function called ping, takes a parameter and exits something else. The same thing with a space between. And in C#, well, it turns into a function called ping that takes a string and returns a string. So it's very easy to work with, very convenient. But with Business Central version 20, we can no longer use basic authentication. And basic authentication was typically, unless you used Windows authentication, that was how you communicated with the SOAP endpoint. So now with BC20, we need to do something about this. We need to make sure that our old code can work on a BC20. Unfortunately, if we take the easy way here and say client credentials, and then let's look at what we have. We have we have username, we have Windows, we have peer, and we have something called issue token, which is a whole token service. It's not the token that we want to use. That's something completely different. What we figure out is that, hey, we cannot, there's not a out of the box change 2 lines of code and then we're back running with something else. So what do we do? And I want to show you what I have done, and then we can look at that, and then perhaps that could inspire you to what you want to do. So first thing, with OAuth, and now I'm using the application OAuth thing. So I have created a app registration in Azure Portal. I have added that to my let's actually, maybe we should open that just so you guys can see. I wonder where it is. I think it's called BC20 in my here. I will just log into that one. So I have, come on BC, I have registered the app in Azure, and then I have assigned that to be able to log into my BC under Azure Active Directory applications. You can see it's sitting here. It's called 084 something. I have given that some permissions. It's always good with some permissions, right? And then what I have done, and you can see there's a couple of other videos if you look for OAuth on the channel, and if you haven't seen them, hey, how about becoming a subscriber? Your life will get better, the sun will shine more, and all that good stuff. So I have a couple of videos showing how to actually get the token and so on. So I will just do the good old copy paste here, and then we can do a quick walk through what this code is actually doing. So here's a function called GetToken, and this will contact login.microsoft.online.com, and it will pass my client ID and my client secret, and we will ask for the grant type is client credentials, and then we get a token back, an access token. So with that in hand, we have what is needed to log in. But how do we actually put that token into our WCF call up here? Because clearly there's no way of doing it. Well, there is, but it's kind of convoluted. So you can see here in my little project, I do have another file called WCF that I created before we started the video in order for you not to just watch me type and type and type and type and type. So these are two classes. One of them is an endpoint, well, it's an endpoint behavior type. And there's an interface for that, endpoint behavior. So I created my own called OAuth token endpoint behavior class, and we can pass a token to that. So the way we actually do that on here is that we'll go up here and then we'll, no, I'm not gonna do that. Sometimes so we can do port client dot endpoint dot endpoint behaviors dot add, and then I'm gonna add a new the OAuth endpoint behavior, the OAuth token endpoint behavior created, and it needs a you see it needs the token. So we will pass the token we're given from GetToken dot result, because this is actually an async function, but since we are in this on purpose, this code is .NET Framework 4.7. I don't believe that supports a main function that is async, or there's something weird about that. So, but this will give you the same sort. So now we're passing the token to this guy. And we probably need to add a semicolon to, but let's just for a second take a look at this guy. What is it actually doing? Well, and as you can see, we just store the token in this class, and then there's a bunch of functions you have to implement in order to fulfill this interface. And one of them is apply client behavior. And there we get the client runtime. And with the client runtime, we have something called client message inspectors. All of this code, you can find it on the GitHub link. So you don't have to write from the screen. You can copy from the GitHub if you want this. So we can see that this is actually adding a message inspector called OAuth token client message inspector, and passes the token to that one. And if we go up and see, that's actually the first one we have up here. So that's another class that is implementing the iClient message inspector interface. The iClient message inspector interface or class gives you there's a function called before send request. It passes the request and it passes the channel, which is exactly what we need, because the request.properties can hold a HTTP request message property. If it already has one, then we will just to the properties that has a collection called headers. We will add the authorization header with bearer and our token. If not, there's a few housekeeping things that we need to do. We need to create a properties piece, then we need to populate the headers, and then we're gonna add that the HTTP request message property class to the properties. But long story short, what this code is doing is making sure that whenever we're doing a call, we're updating the headers and putting this header into the WCF call. So if we go back to this guy, I think the only thing there is actually is to run it, so I'll hit F5. And we got hello, hello, which kind of makes sense because this said POM plus space plus POM, and we pass hello. So we can say hello YouTube, and we can hit it again. No, we cannot hit it again because we was in the breakpoint. So let's stop and then hit it again. So we got it. So how to use this to easily patch your code, so to speak? Well, whenever you create your client class, you gotta add the endpoint behavior. You gotta get the token. So you have to have a function that will get you a token. And some people in the community have said, but Eric, there's tons of library that's doing what you're doing raw. Sure. And perhaps this is bad in a lot of ways, but I think this is actually the reason I did this, is to explain exactly what goes on. So we're just making a simple HTTP post call to that URL with this data, and then we're getting the token back as JSON, and we're passing that out. So I think there's merit in a few lines compared to a few megabytes of DLLs. That's not a discussion. At least this, I believe this has value in actually showing what's going on. But so you need the GetToken function. That was what I was trying to say. Then wherever you create a new client for your SOAP class, you gotta tell that you add the endpoint behavior. And now we can potentially get rid of this. Let's see what happens if we get rid of this. There might be actually WCF get mad at you. No, that works fine. That worked fine. Depending on how you have set up your whole WCF, you might need to change your settings depending on your transport layer, security setting stuff. So in this case, I'm not passing anything to the client, but you could have that you're passing a binding, you're passing an endpoint, and you have built them yourself and stuff like that. In that case, you probably need to make sure that you're binding, whatever you're binding is not making it more difficult for this guy to work. But other than that, so this is, I just took the code and I added my GetToken function. So I have ways to GetToken. I added those two new classes here that are just getting the token into place. And I patch the client after that's created. So that's how you get your old WCF code in C# running as mine did here on an older version of the .NET framework to use OAuth instead of basic authentication. Give it a try. Let me know in the comments below if this works for you, or let me know if it does not work for you and why. I'd love to hear. Anyway, have fun, and I will see you in this video because that's a good one. The YouTube algorithm has decided this is the one for you. Go for it. See you there. Bye.